All right, I want to welcome everyone to our closing keynote. And the sponsor for this event is the Federal Home Loan Bank of Indianapolis. And here with us today is Anna Shires, Vice President and Community Investment Outreach Partner. Please give Anna a hand and a round of applause.
Thank you, Van, and thank you to our good friends at MISTA for putting on such an incredible conference. As Van mentioned, I am Anna Shires, Vice President and Community Investment Outreach Partner for the Federal Home Loan Bank of Indianapolis. For those that don't know about us, we are a national system that covers the entire country. We are carved out into districts, and the Federal Home Loan Bank of Indianapolis covers the state of Indiana and Michigan. We are not a bank in the traditional sense. We have no branches. No single person can take out a loan from us. Instead, we are a source of liquidity and capital to our member financial institutions in Michigan and Indiana. Our members include community banks, credit unions, insurance companies, and a handful of CDFIs. Some of our members are in the room today with us, so thank you for being here. One of our biggest missions is to invest grant dollars into affordable housing and community development. And that said, our 2024 round for affordable housing development grant dollars is coming up quickly. So I want to put that on all of your radars, everyone sitting here, with key deadlines in just a few weeks. If you haven't heard about our affordable housing program, I encourage you to visit our webpage. Please reach out to us with any questions. Our headquarters might be in Indianapolis, but just know that we are just as much committed to Michigan. We have an office located in downtown Detroit and have local staff members making sure that member financial institutions and community partners are supported in accessing our programs and products. With that, I am so excited to introduce our final session of the conference. Detroit is such a hub of innovation, and our moderator and panelists could not reflect that more. I'd like to first introduce the moderator from Rocket Community Fund. Please welcome to the stage, Laura Graneman. And a few words about our special guests, Keith Bynum and Evan Thomas of HGTV's Bargain Block and Rock the Block. These visionaries buy rundown and abandoned properties and transform them into affordable and stylish starter homes for first-time home buyers. Please welcome Keith and Evan. You guys are so awesome. Welcome to the stage.
Thank you so much. What an honor to be here with all of you. As was mentioned, my name is Laura Graneman. I have the honor and pleasure of leading the Rocket Community Fund and the Gilbert Family Foundation, both of which are headquartered in Detroit. I could not be more excited for this conversation because you all do such important work on the ground every day. I think we're going to talk a little bit about some housing trends, but I also think we're going to have a lot of fun. So I appreciate the opportunity to close out this amazing conference. And just a big thank you to everyone who put this conference on. It really is transformational to bring people together in different ways and support and nourish the conversations that we have to have as an industry in order to move trends forward and serve our clients on a daily basis. So thank you all. But let's get started. So without giving too much away, I want you all to tell your own story a little bit. You both have such interesting backgrounds. Can you talk a little bit about how you started and how you ended up in Detroit?
So growing up, my parents were both teachers, and every year we did a home addition to the house during the summer. So we spent the school year pretty much planning, designing, and then when school let out, it was very exciting because we started our execution of the project. So from a very young age, I've loved construction. It was always something that was very much a big part of my life. And so throughout my entire career, I've kind of leaned back into that passion. And that's kind of how I got Evan to come along, was that passion, because he has a little bit of a different story. But that was kind of where I fell in love with houses. And then we were working up in Colorado for years, flipping, and the barriers to entry there are very different than Detroit. The houses were very expensive. The labor pool was challenging because it was expensive and there was a lot of demand. So we were looking for opportunities outside of that region. Detroit popped up in our map, Cleveland, Toledo, Baltimore. There was a lot of areas that we saw opportunity in, but ultimately Detroit kind of won out for just the cool vibe. Like, Detroit is a really fantastically cool city. There's a lot of art there, things that I love, and that's kind of how that got started.
We were doing a few houses up in the mountains, actually, just outside of Denver, and that's where I started getting into all of this. I was actually in graduate school for physics when I met Keith, and when we moved in, we bought a fixer, of course. And so we were slowly renovating that house while I was in school, and he actually had a full-time job as a manager at a furniture company. And I think that house took us around like 9 months to renovate. And then we bought another one up even higher up in the mountains on a glacier just to make it even more challenging for us. And Keith, at that point, quit his job. He focused entirely on renovating that house. I was still in school, so I would just kind of help on the weekends. But then once that house was finished, it was right around the time that I was finishing with graduate school. So I kind of had this choice of, do I proceed in what I was schooled in, or do I go off with Keith in this fanciful world of renovating houses?
Fanciful.
And obviously I chose the latter. And
The fanciful.
The fanciful.
we were actually trying to buy our third house up in, I think it was in Evergreen in Colorado, and it was this one house we went to go look at. It was a total dump, like falling apart, and it was like $350,000. And so we're like, all right, this isn't gonna work. Like, we're gonna have to have a bankroll of millions if we want to do, more than one. So I think that's kind of what got Keith thinking about other markets and what market can we actually afford. And Detroit was really high up there because it's very affordable, especially for all of the abandoned homes.
The original plan for Detroit was kind of, the reason the passion for the whole project kind of erupted was we were looking, I was looking at houses in the north part of Detroit, which was bordering Ferndale, obviously. So in Denver, we had never had a comp issue. Like, if you cross a city boundary, if it's within your half-mile radius, it's still counted as a comp. So when I was looking in the Detroit market on Zillow and things like that, I was working under that same assumption, and I told him I would bring these houses to him, and I'm like, Evan, you're not gonna believe this. Like, we're gonna make so much money. There's a house in Ferndale. Like, literally, my eyeballs had turned
Literally
into
one
dollars.
block away.
It's a block away. We had identified a bunch of comps in Ferndale, thinking again that would translate south of 8 Mile. So of course we bought our first house in Detroit just south of Ferndale with this realization that, like, our investment was sound, hopefully based on the comps that we were looking at. And I was not expecting the response I got, which was when we went to list that first house, it was listed at $64,000. The exact same house 1 block away was $220,000. And it just made me livid. Like, you don't even know. Like, he heard rants I still rant about it, actually. I just got covered in chills again because I'm still, that was kind of where that first house was kind of like, this is so ridiculous. Like, you tell me why 1 block away is almost 4 times as much. Like, didn't make sense. So instead of leaving, the passion project became, we had to do something about it, and that's kind of how we got started in Detroit.
Well, as someone who lives in Detroit, I just want to express gratitude to you for sticking with it. Thank you both. I can totally understand your pain, actually, as the Racket Community Fund operationalizes a program called the Rehab and Ready program, which supports rehabs alongside the Detroit Land Bank Authority to set comparables. And so we have very similar missions, trying to sort of restart the access to financing in certain neighborhoods across the city of Detroit. Totally can relate to that pain. Yeah. Can you talk a little bit more about some of the other maybe unexpected or barriers that you've experienced in trying to scale up the work that you do?
I mean,
There's just so many.
there are a lot of
where do you begin?
barriers. As you guys know, in affordable housing, there's a lot of barriers, but some of the things that we fought for the last 6-7 years really hard on were appraisal gaps. You would get an appraiser that would come up to a house, and I've watched with my own eyes an appraiser go to the front door of a house, nothing happened. They turned around and walked off, and in the notes said they were fearful for their life and did not do the appraisal. And I was standing there, I was like, was there a dog I didn't see? Like, what is she referring to? It was a good block. It was not that, it should not have been like that. And so again, there was that moment of like, I'm just fuming in the car watching this, and it's just not fair because we can't get a fair appraisal. I like to think that things have changed, but we just had one 2 days ago. We got an appraisal back for a house that had very strong comps that was under by almost 15%. And so when you're a small business trying to do something like this, a margin change like that on a house hurts us very bad. And I understand that value obviously is really important, especially in these neighborhoods, not to overvalue something or, however it goes. But when you have strong comps, there shouldn't be any reason whatsoever that you don't use those. And that house was top of the line. So, we still have a lot of work to do in that area. Thankfully, HUD reached out last couple of weeks, and they made a visit to one of the houses, in fact, the house that just appraised low, and they've been working on creating a kind of like essentially what I understand is like a hotline for if you feel that you've had an unfair appraisal, there's a place now that you can call. And I was like, I'm gonna have that number on repeat, or like on speed dial, because those are those type of moments where you're sitting there and you're saying, this is ridiculous, this is killing our margin, and the buyers in this pool do not have enough cash necessarily to bring to it. So you're either forced to take a cut or a buyer loses a house. We wind up usually taking the cut. And so those are those moments where, we kind of see that there's still a lot of work to do. And again, it's a $175,000 house. We shouldn't have this kind of issue. And I think moving forward on these houses is kind of like, it's so important that we understand where those weaknesses are. And I think this is a room full of lenders and financial people, so making sure that maybe it's 2 appraisals or something to get a second opinion. There's gotta be something that can help offset that. But it's also hurting people that are in the neighborhood that are looking to use the equity in their home. And if they're continually undervalued, that's tricky.
We also have had a lot of issue in the past, especially getting financing for these types of houses. There's really, at least, I could be ignorant, but we have not really found a loan product that is essentially like a renovation loan for these types of homes, because the value of the unrenovated home is so low and even the post-renovation value is still kind of low. So we've had trouble getting financing. If you're trying to scale up a business, not having access to financing makes it pretty tricky. So we've now entered into the New Orleans market, and in contrast, there are renovation products there, just because the homes are valued more, that you can actually get a loan just to renovate, and they will loan based off of the post-renovation number. Whereas in Detroit, we've tried that, and people are like, no, we don't do that. That's just because they view it as too risky.
Yeah, it's definitely limiting the number of investors that are going to come in. Fix and flip funding is an integral part of what we do. We don't have access to that because of these houses. if you were to do a flip in Ferndale where the house is 200 and you're going to sell it for 400, those numbers work for that type of lending, but for the fix and flip funding, it doesn't work for, they've literally told us, they're like, it's not worth our time to process a loan that's going to wind up being, 175,000 or so. And it's just frustrating, because it's like, well, it's a little loan, like what's the problem? It should be clear that those would be even easier to make, but that's stopping a lot of investment. I would say, when we're on the ground in Detroit and we talk to other investors, there's a house that we just finished that there's 6 other houses actively going on on that block. 2 of them are privately funded. 2 of them are funded actually through the Land Bank Rehab and Ready program, so that they're working with contractors. We love that program. But then
I did not pay him to say that.
No, but it's great. I mean, that's the on-the-ground thing that is helping change, like, all of these neighborhoods that we work in. But the other 2 guys, we talk to them all the time, and I'm trying to constantly brainstorm on different funding approaches because we don't have access to that fix and flip capital like you would in a normal market. And again, like when you're talking about a marginal neighborhood that's just on the tip of being able to say, hey, it's not gentrified, but it's like stabilized. We don't want to gentrify, we want to stabilize, but the only way you can do that is to get enough of the houses renovated that are left. And that's kind of, we just continually face this wall with the funding element.
So we've had to get very,
Very
creative over
Thankfully,
the years.
We're very creative.
Well,
So-
speaking of being creative, I think one of the things that I've learned over the last few years in trying to support Detroit residents to stay in their home in particular, we just anecdotally, we rolled out a program called the Detroit Home Repair Fund about a year ago, a little more than a year ago. And when we rolled that out, it's a $20 million fund that supports low-income homeowners with grant funding to do rehabs in their homes. When we rolled that out, we got 250,000 phone calls within the first week of the program. We had to add a lot more capacity to our call center. But I think it speaks to the depth of need and the extent of the home repairs that you are seeing in the city of Detroit. And so speaking of creativity, right, how do you think about when you go into a house and you're looking for the potential of that home and you're trying to think of what it could be, but you're seeing real challenges with foundations and roofs and things that are really cost intensive. And I'm curious how you approach rehabs in a city like Detroit versus what I assume you saw, although it's an assumption, in some of the other markets you've worked in, which may have been less extensive rehab needs. So how do you manage just the depth of the need in terms of the rehab you're facing?
I mean, the main thing on these houses is thankfully they were built really well back in the day. So that helps more than anything. Now that we're seeing, a contrast to that in New Orleans where the houses are literally almost completely rebuilt, our opportunity in Detroit is to say, you can significantly reduce the amount of construction dollars poured into a project just by saving the foundation. There's a lot of framing that's saved. Those are opportunities for us to go in and actually take a look at a project and figure out whether or not we're going to be able to pull one off. Because I love the idea of being creative on certain elements, but there are certain things that I cannot create my way a solution for it. You have to have good framing. You have to have a strong, everything has to be pretty much brand new. So again, that challenge of we get creative in what we can save, but there are certain things that you have to do, and I think that's where, with that combination of both, where we can look at a project and say, all right, we're going to be able to save 40 to 50% of this house just by coming in and fixing what little we have to do there, but making sure that the buyer of this house is going to get something that's going to last them forever. I will say, in the last few years, we've really tried to focus in on increasing our quality to make sure that these home buyers are getting something that it's the best that they can get for the price. Because as you were talking with the home repair thing, a homeowner, I don't think, especially a new homeowner, doesn't realize exactly how expensive it is to maintain a house or what all has to be done. I was cleaning my gutters this morning, and I was like, I always talk about cleaning gutters, so I was like, I have to make sure mine are clean this morning before I get here, and then I'm lecturing everybody about cleaning it. But those type of things are what save a house ultimately. Yeah. And so, we see a lot of houses in these neighborhoods that have failure. That's the fastest way to fix a lot of the main issues. And we're working with CFCU, our credit union now, to do several roofs in Fitzgerald. I think we've got 10 so far that we've got funding for. But if you can stop it at the roof, you can save most of the house. And this idea of that need, the depth of need in these neighborhoods is off the charts. There's not ever going to be an opportunity for a lot of these people that live here to ever afford a new roof either. They don't have home insurance. They do not have the funds just sitting in an account to go put $8,000, $10,000 into a new roof. So you're going to lose another homeowner in the neighborhood if you don't get in and do something to stop that. And I think that's kind of the other thing is it's not just about bringing back people to the houses that we're renovating. It's about keeping people in the houses that are already there, because that's what's stabilizing. Those people that have lived in these neighborhoods for 30, 40 years, they run the block clubs. They're the ones you need. You have to have that stabilization to be able to pull off what we're doing. Because without that, we're dead in the water, So, thank you.
So important.
But I think our opportunity has been and it continues to be to communicate directly with the people that we work around to figure out what that need looks like. And I think that's a big opportunity for financial groups or anybody that has any kind of funding, like go walk the neighborhood. Like the director of HUD coming to our neighborhood and walking the houses, she got a different perspective, and that's necessary.
Yeah, so I really appreciate what you said about keeping people in their homes as well. I'm interested, and I think our audience would be interested to know a little bit about the buyers who are buying the homes that you are rehabbing. Can you tell us a little bit about that? And also I would remark that the prices that you're noting are still very accessible prices. So it is very impressive that you're able to do this kind of gut rehab for prices that are still maybe not capital A affordable, but quite accessible prices.
Yeah, I don't think in the city of Detroit, I don't think we personally have sold a house for, I think all of them have been under 200,000. There have been some people who we've worked with that have had houses that sold for more, but I don't think our houses that we've owned have ever sold for more than that. So I think it is very affordable. I mean, the difference in a mortgage between $150,000 versus $108,000 is really not that much. And I think it's important to go back to what Keith was saying, actually, I think one of the issues with the state of a lot of these homes is that they are so undervalued that you get a lot of work that's very poor work. You see houses that have been renovated and it's not good work, and it actually hurts the house, like sort of as much as it was prior to. And I think a lot of the reasons for that is because they're so chronically undervalued that people come in and they say, okay, I can't spend any money here because I'm gonna lose my ass on it. But that's one of the huge challenges that we see is how do you combat things like that by increasing value but not increasing it so much that you start to create a different problem.
The flips that are going on in the neighborhoods a lot of times are great, but then a lot of times, as he was saying, they're not, and ultimately that hurts a buyer. They're the ones that are going to pick up the tab after the fact when those things aren't done right. So I think it's as important to focus on creating a pool of contractors that understand how important it is to get it right. And that's another area I think that we have an opportunity is to bring more young people, especially into the trades, and just try to express how important some of these things really are. Because as a young person, I found that nothing was terribly important, but having someone share a passion about a house changed how I saw things. My parents were very passionate about doing it right and completing it, and they didn't always have the money to do it exactly the fanciest, but they got creative and they figured out ways to pull off what they needed to pull off. And that was, that's what we've applied to these projects, is taking something and making it the basic as great as it possibly can be, so that long term you're still going to have house issues, but for the most part you've got a good base to go off of. And then from there you can learn. A home buyer, if they care any ounce, they can learn so much about how to take care of their house. You know, the resources are out there for that. And so, you know, like full circle, you know, I still see such an opportunity to get more people into this world of like understanding their house, you know. But that house, like maintaining that house is so important too.
So can you describe your average buyer?
So
Back,
back to the
kind of took a tangent there.
Listen, I asked like
My
4
bad. Sorry,
questions
sorry.
at one time, so
no,
don't
it's
even
gonna
worry
happen
about
like
it.
15 more times. So most of our buyers are female, most of our buyers are black, and I would say most of them either grew up in the neighborhood adjacent or in our neighborhood that we're working on. I think that's also been kind of one of those things that, thanks. We definitely, I mean, I think it's really important that first-time home buyers are such a near and dear thing to me because I know what it did for me my first house. That sense of pride that I had, that sense of ownership, that suddenly I felt grounded, all of those things contribute to an overall better life. And if you have kids, even better. That's one of the houses that we sold last year was a single dad he has 3 kids, and oh my God, they're so cute. But it was one of those things, you saw his face on that front porch that day that he walked his 3 kids into their home. That's a powerful moment, you know, and getting to be a part of that, bringing people back to the community that they thought that they would never have an opportunity to live right around the corner from their mother. You know, like that feels nice, and people definitely have responded in kind to that. Like you see this community effort to keep people there, to talk about what we're doing, to bring more investment in. So it has been really nice. I think, you know, people just assume because they're new renovations or whatever that, you know, people from the burbs are coming in and buying these houses, and it's, you know, every now and then that happens, and that's cool. Like I'm all for that too, but it is awesome to offer a product that people from the community are proud of and can have access to. So that to me has been a big thing. Thank you.
Okay, so you mentioned already a tip around home maintenance, which is clean your gutters.
Clean your gutters.
For all of us homeowners out here trying to do our best to keep up with the home repair needs of our own homes, are there any tips that you might give us to help us out?
I mean, gutters are number
It all
one.
starts from above down. So if you have a house that is in good condition, when water gets in, that's when the house starts to fail. So you have to keep your gutters clean. You have to keep on your roof. You have to look at flashing around things like chimneys, things like soffits. Anywhere that water can get in, especially in Michigan, that is like the number one thing that will destroy a house here.
Yeah, I grew up in the desert, so this whole water thing is like a nightmare to me. Like
And the vermin.
and mold and all this
And
stuff.
all the little squirrels and things that get everywhere.
So like
The tiniest little hole will become a nest.
we currently have a family of squirrels living above our closet/bathroom.
I don't think they're squirrels anymore. I think it's something smaller, but it's.
Well, that's not good. Anyway, I mean, we do this for a living and it still happens. But you know, I think my one tip is keep your roof good. Like, you can stop so much of the drama of a house falling apart if you can do that. And again, it kind of goes back to keeping people in their houses starts at the roof, and that's
Because honestly, most of the foundations of these homes are fine.
Oh, no.
I mean, every so often we'll run across one that's not, but usually they're good. And so what we always see is that, well, the roof failed, and that's why the house is falling down. The foundation's fine. Everything else, the framing where water didn't get is perfect. So just keeping that water out is the number one thing, which is why we've started the Roof the Block initiative in the Fitzgerald neighborhood to help homeowners who are already living there keep the roof new and fresh so that this doesn't happen to their homes, because it is rampant.
No, I mean, you know how you see the blue tarps, you know how important it is, especially, again, we get so much rain, but I'm really excited about that because that's the first time I feel like we're able to directly give back to the people that are currently living there. And again, you should get a reward, you know, for you stuck out this kind of tough neighborhood for a while, and it's kind of like, those are the people that held those neighborhoods together. And anything that we can do to support them is number one priority in our book. Because we're not going to sell houses if they're not there, So anyway, I like the Roof the Block name too. I thought that was a really creative name. I did not come up with it, but it was a good name.
How are you picking the neighborhoods that you're active in?
I live on Zillow and Redfin, and I'm always looking for, kind of like, in Detroit it's a little different now, I'll admit. Like, we know the West Side so well, but just like what we were talking about, Morningside has now popped up on our radar as a possibility. I go a lot off of what people tell me. I'm saying, I keep hearing the name Morningside. Everybody keeps telling me, so I'm like, all right, well, let's drive through Morningside and see what's going on. And that's kind of how all of it has happened. Fitzgerald was the same. We were working north of Bagley. Fitzgerald popped up as what seemed like the next adjacent neighborhood to, start looking at. And at the time, I remember the first time we went through Fitzgerald too, I was like, oh boy. Because from where we had started, the neighborhood closer to Ferndale was more stable. There wasn't quite as many abandoned houses. I think the first block on Prairie, we had like 4 or 5 total. Go down to Fitzgerald, it was 4 or 5 lived-in houses. The rest of it was abandoned. So it was a little bit of a different deal, but we've seen such a massive change in such a short amount of time because the city has stepped up and really put in the infrastructure that is going to bring people back. They've gotten rid of the blighted houses that are too severe even for us. So there's been a lot of effort gone into this particular neighborhood. I know it's happening all over the city, but this particular neighborhood, we definitely feel the momentum from a lot of parties. Brilliant Detroit is a great group to work with in that area. The Live 6 corridor has really just blown up, and it's awesome to work amongst that energy. So I like that area a lot. I was looking at the land bank again, and they had commercial lots available, which typically we don't do, but we just did a house that backs up to a bunch of commercial lots. And so my idea was, since there's not a demand for retail at the moment, what I thought would be fun was to build these little block buildings that had super cute exteriors, but they're like storage units for now. But as that area develops, you could repurpose them into coffee shops or whatever. But that type of commercial stabilization, like the Livernois corridor that we were discussing earlier, those type of things are really important to bringing homeowners back. So we've seen a lot of momentum in Detroit, and we're really grateful for that.
I'm going to ask you a pop quiz question. They did not know this was coming. If you were a benign dictator for a day, royalty, let's go with royalty. You're royalty for a day. What would be the one thing that you would do in order to support the housing ecosystem in Detroit?
If I was a queen, what would I do?
Took it one step further.
I would say focusing in on the people that live in the neighborhoods and talking to them about what their needs are and what they are looking for in their neighborhood, I think would be my first start. I would be like Princess Diana, talking to everyone. That's how you learn what is necessary to rebuild a neighborhood. And I think that's kind of like with this roof initiative, that's what we kept hearing. It's like roofs need help, people need help with their roofs, let's do it. I think talking to the people that live there is absolutely the highest priority for I love our banker, Tansley. I don't know if Tansley's here with CFCU, but she has made such an effort to come and meet us on the ground in these neighborhoods to understand what they're investing in, what they're helping us with, and what our problems look like. And along the way, talking to homeowners that are going through some of the issues that we face every day, and first-time homebuyers, helping them get into these houses. Like, those are the opportunities that, connecting all of those points as royalty would be much easier. So
I think I would try and create an easier path for funding for people who want to work in these areas, because it's been really hard for us, and we have a TV show, So imagine how hard it is for everyone else.
Right.
And we've seen it actually a lot. We work with contractors who buy their own houses, and they try and do what we do, and it's just so hard because you have to have so much cash, and you can't get loans, and it makes it very hard for the neighborhood to kind of rebound, because it's just like the barrier to entry is just like you just have to like get past that, and that's very difficult. So I think I would try and create something that would make that a little bit easier.
We've talked about like a training program where we kind of help guide some of the investors and the builders and contractors that we work with that do their own project. We've definitely offered a lot of advice and guidance to them to get through their projects too, to help them understand like how important cash flow management is for a project like that. And I think
And where do you save money and where do you not save money? I
Right,
think
like-
that's an important thing. We've seen people, they're not our jobs, but we've seen people doing, framing with finish nails and just kind of nightmarish things because one, maybe they don't have the knowledge, and two, they don't have the capital to hire the right people to do the job. And so it just kind of spirals.
The one thing about the show that I don't lament it, I guess, but I definitely think that sometimes the show portrays what we do it portrays it to be much easier than it is in reality. In reality, the funding is difficult. It's tricky to find the right buyer. It's tricky to get through all the material purchase. Like the labor pool is tricky. All of it's tricky. And I'm not saying that to discourage anybody. I don't want to do that. But I think if there was an easier path to fund some of these things, it would be revolutionary for these neighborhoods. They just fall right below what people in the banking world want to pay attention to. I think that's such an opportunity.
You do have such an interesting story, and having gone from living in the homes that you're renovating to now having your own show, can you just tell us a little bit about the process of getting that show? What was it like? Did you pitch it? How do you get the attention to be able to start a show like this?
Well, I don't know if anyone has seen it, but if you look back.
Who's seen it? Who's seen it?
No, I mean.
All right. Yeah. Okay.
No, Bargain Black, I assume some people have, but.
Let's hope somebody
Let's hope
I hope
someone
many
has,
people
but,
have. Yes.
Even before that, there was a show called Tiny House Paradise, which was on HGTV, and Keith actually did one episode of that show
in Colorado.
Because Keith had a friend who was always looking at casting calls and knew that Keith was a builder. And so she had found this casting call for a tiny house show and asked if Keith wanted to do it. So Keith said sure, and that's kind of what got Keith in the door with production companies. And he did that and went fine.
Fine-ish.
Well, the show did well, and the house was beautiful and all.
There's always a story. Yeah.
And all of that stuff. But then we moved to Detroit, and so that whole production company kind of just sort of like let us go. And then another one also in Denver, because they all kind of like know what one another's doing, jumped in and started to talk to Keith, and then they started to talk to both of us about what we were doing in Detroit, and then they kind of thought that there was a show there. We kind of ignored them for like 6 months because we were very poor and stressed and not really wanting to like deal with that. Because they were like wanting us to do these things and like shoot on your iPhone and like send it to us and blah, blah, blah. We're like, no, I just like, that's too much. But they eventually convinced us to do some shots on our iPhones, and they created what's called a sizzle reel. And that's actually what sold the concept to the network. And then we did pilot, and then we got a series, and then here we are.
The pilot was, so leading up to the pilot for the show, we had done 2 houses in 2 years in Detroit.
It was like 3 at that point.
2.5. We were not finished with the third one.
Well, we were going very slowly because we were not hiring people. We were doing everything. That's how we kept our margins at that point, is we had to do a lot of the work on our own. So then naturally, that's a low quantity.
Yeah. So when they came to us, they wanted us to do this pilot, which was 2 houses in 6 weeks. And
like, sure, why not?
I maybe am an idiot. I don't know. Like, sometimes I wonder. But we said yes, and somehow we got through it. Evan almost succumbed to heat stroke at one point because Michigan never stops raining in the spring. And we had this deadline for drywall, so we had the house at like 140 with heaters trying to just dry it out. And I was doing the lower part. I was doing the lower half because I'm short. He was doing the ceiling where it was probably more like 180. And I'm just like, I was like, it's toasted down here. I like it. Meanwhile, he's like dying up there, and so.
And like 10 hours later, when we finally finish, I realized that something's not right with my body.
So the next 3 days, he was violently ill. So I was doing a lot of this, even, it just got worse. And so finally, we got through it. We met their deadlines. Evan and I are, one thing is, if you give us a deadline, we're not going to miss it. Like, I can't miss the deadline. It just irritates me to no end. Thankfully, he's the exact same. So we got that done. And
We didn't even know that it was an option to miss.
no,
We were like,
had no
like
idea.
probably it would have been fine
Yeah,
if
they
we had
would've.
missed it, but like a week or two, like nothing bad would have happened.
Oh,
But we
you're
thought
speaking
that
to
like,
my soul right now. When people miss deadlines, I am so stressed out about it. Yeah.
Ew.
and so we literally almost killed ourselves getting it, but we did meet it.
And then, we were really proud of these houses, but we were left, they didn't pay anything. So they paid nothing we got, I think they paid us $2,500 each per episode, or for the episode. So we had $150,000 in credit card debt after this. We had 2 houses that were not complete and were not going to be complete for another 4 to 5, maybe 6 months. So Evan and I, for 4 months, we ate this. We bought a giant bag of rice and a giant bag of beans, and that's what we ate for 3 to 4 months. And we worked every day for 16, 18-hour days to make sure that we were going to get through this. Because if we didn't, we were going to be filing bankruptcy, and that would have been the end of all of this. So your motivation was really high, but you talk about stress beyond stress. One of the other crazy things is the leading up to season 1, we had money lined up from investors, and then COVID hit. We had just signed the contract for season 1, and it was going to be 16 houses. We had raised close to $1 million to be able to get through this, and 2 days before we started filming, that disappeared. And so we had to call the TV people, and we're like, we don't have any money to do this 2 days before. We started filming anyway, and I don't know why, but we were just like, I guess we'll get through it. But then COVID shut everything down, and so that year, the season 1, what you see, I can't watch season 1. I've watched it one time each episode, but I can't watch it because it just hurts to watch,
That was design under duress.
Yes.
I would say that. Some questionable decisions were made, but hey, we made them at 6 a.m. At Home Depot because it had to be made, and we had.
Anytime
no
I
time.
see a comment on social about me nailing twigs to a wall, I'm just like, you don't know what I was going through. You have no idea. So anyway, we all learned a lot. I think the main point was the perseverance paid off. Perseverance pays off always, I find. But the same feel with the communities in Detroit. Their perseverance to stay put in these neighborhoods and suffer through some of these really shitty things, is really the reason that we're still sitting on this stage. That it goes back to that community, and it just came out and supported us in a way that was really what it was we got through most of this because of our neighbors around us, the people that we hired, these 2 homeless people that were living across the street in an attic at this house, and they turned out to be 2 of the best hires we've had in a long time. In the end, things got a little weird, but it was one of those things where you use the resources that you have, and when you needed the community support, everybody came out and helped us. We couldn't have done it without that. So that's how we got through. And a lot of pound cake. Every time I turned around, I got a pound cake in Detroit. I love pound cake.
Okay, so I'm hearing perseverance was an important lesson that you took from this particular experience. Is looking back on your sort of trajectory of your career, what advice would you give to anyone, any fan who's talking to you about how they can succeed?
That's interesting. I mean, my go-to has always just been work hard and don't give up, because if you give up, then you're screwed. And also having the bravery to actually do it, because I think that's those 3 things. If you miss one of them, then you're kind of done. And you have to have all 3 of them if you want to make something difficult work. I mean, you could just do easy things, which I have no problem with. But if you're trying to do something hard, you really have to have all 3 of those. Otherwise, it's just, you're not going to make it. And definitely during season 1, we had to pull all of those things together because there were moments where we were exhausted, we didn't want to keep working, moments where we just wanted to give up because we just didn't see a path forward. There were moments where we were terrified to keep swiping that card because, like, hopefully this is going to work out because I'm in massive debt. But we just kept going, and you just solve whatever problem is immediately in front of you, and then you solve the next one, and the next one, and the next one, and it's kind of never ending, but hopefully the problems become simpler and easier and less stressful as time goes on.
I think the creative approach that we took was kind of the reason we were able to get through it. I'm a Capricorn with Capricorn rising, so I love money management. That was kind of
His cash flow management, I mean, just in his brain, like he doesn't really like computers, but what he can do just in his brain with cash flow management will rival anyone. It's really astonishing because
Thank you.
how we managed that season 1 was miraculous.
It was definitely one of those things, though, at the end, when you come out of that and you see that and you know that you got it done, was such a, oh my God, like what a high, to have struggled for so long. And it was really kind of when we got the ratings back from that first episode, everybody was like, all right, it's obvious that it was worth, and I think without the creative approach, Evan and I have a wildly different approach. If you were to ask us how to do a single simple task, I would do it very differently than him. And I think the key to our success as not only as a business owners, but as a couple has been to find that common ground and be able to kind of compromise in a way that works without being disrespectful. That is what got us through all of that. Because if we had fought even for 1 second during any of that, that would have been, it just wouldn't have happened. So we really learned a lot about each other, we learned a lot about ourselves, and we learned a lot about compromise. But creative approaches definitely saved the day.
Well, it's obvious that they're an incredible partnership. They have an incredible partnership, right? You can tell.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
It speaks to collaboration, partnership, resilience. I think that's incredibly inspirational. Detroit also is really known for its creativity and its art and its architecture, and you're working in a space that's really steeped in deep history, and I'm curious about the way that you make sure that Detroit really shows up in each of the houses that you're working in.
Detroit is such a fabulous character to bring to the show because there's an infinite number of wonderful things to pull up because of the history that's, it rivals any world city in terms of its history and architecture and art and murals and all of these things that it was so funny. Years ago when I told my family that I was moving to Detroit, I was the first, I have 49 first cousins, I was the first one to leave Texas. And so that was such a thing, and then to not only do that, but to go to Detroit. That was nobody could fathom what I had done. And I just said, you've got to come see. You've just got to come see it. It's the community, it's the art, it's the architecture, it's the history. You're in the center of the world at one point, So it is kind of cool to have an infinite supply of inspiration. Like, if I ever get bored, I go look for some Plavix somewhere, That's the amazing thing about Detroit. And the one other thing that I think is most fascinating about the architecture is even the smallest of the little houses built in the 30s into 20s had the same level of beautiful artisan finishes that the big old mansions in Palmer Woods have. The beautiful plaster work, the castings, all the fireplaces, the tile work. Nobody does that anymore, especially in a small house. So just seeing that passion and the love that went into those houses back in the day is fascinating. Plus, every now and then you'll see some, archway that's like, all right, somebody was having a lot of fun with their arch detail that day because it's like super elaborate. Those are those fun stories that you come across and you're like, that's amazing inspiration.
And it helps that the houses were built so well that we can actually save. We try and save as much as we can. Obviously, there's some houses that are so gone with water damage that you just can't save anything. But a lot of houses, there are things that we can that we can save, like those plaster details, because plaster holds up very well. It's not like drywall. And so that's always fun to be able to go into these cute little houses that were so well built and with such care that you can actually save a feature like that, because if it was a modern home that was left to its own devices for as long as these houses were, you wouldn't be able to save anything. It would be completely gone.
Yeah, and that's kind of the sad thing about seeing these houses fall completely, like when they get demoed, most of them need it, but it's still sad. Plaster is such a superior product. The framing, all the lumber that was used back in the day, superior to today. All of those things that if you can save any of them, they're gonna last you another 100 years. Because I find it absolutely fascinating when you walk into a house that's had no windows and a failing roof for years and 70% of the plaster is in perfect shape. That tells you the quality of that house. Drywall in 1 week with no roof is all gone. So, that again is such an inspiration to be able to save something that has that amount of quality in it still. So that's been a fun thing for us to see.
Well, we've got a couple minutes left. Could you leave us maybe with one behind the scenes story that we don't
There's so many.
see?
So many. Speaking, go ahead.
Which one were you gonna say?
I was gonna tell the plaster cast of the latest house where we did the breast augmentation on the statue.
That's going to be on the show though, so that's not BTS.
Yeah,
The
that's
first
true.
house that we ever moved into, so this was the house that we eventually sold for $64,000. Part of Keith convincing me to do this was that, okay, I bought this house, it's livable, it's great, we're just going to move right in and we'll fix it up. I'm like, all right, sounds fine. And then we get there.
To interject, to be fair, I did think that the house was livable, to be fair to me. And to Evan again, I did not go in this house. But this was my very first house.
No,
that I
because
ever
it
saw.
was boarded up and padlocked, and
Well,
Keith
yeah,
just
I assumed if it was like anywhere else in the country, you would be able to take that down and it would be a fully functional house.
And
like,
you have a bathroom and a kitchen and water and power and everything's great.
you would have to turn on the utilities. But anyway.
So we get there, and none of that is the case. The bathroom is completely disgusting, non-functional. The kitchen has roach bodies that are about 1 inch thick. The walls are literally weeping because there's so much like oil residue just along the entire house. It's not livable. And so we get an Airbnb and we start working on it. The first thing that we want to do is get the bathroom ready so that we can move in. And so we start putting water down the drain. Nothing's happening. So we go down into the basement and we look at the main. I was there.
I don't remember that. But anyway.
And we're looking at what used to be a clean out for a main sewer line. And there's this what looks like a feather duster stuck in it. So Keith's like, oh, that's clearly the problem. So he goes in and grabs it and pulls it out. And it's like a mummified squirrel
Oh my God, I can
that
see
had
where this is
been
going.
that had semi-decomposed but still juicy.
It's really nasty.
But you know what? It started to drain. So
Well, thank you for that sacrifice.
Yeah, it was. I definitely check twice now before I just grab something. But that was
you
really
never
gross.
know.
Yeah. No, we've come across our fair share of.
And that honestly is that's like the tamest stuff that we've come across.
Yeah, you definitely have a different perspective on human beings after you dive into enough houses. You're like, man, people are weird.
All right, well, I think I can speak for everyone when I say we really appreciate both your time today and also just watching you do what you do best. It's a real treat, so thank you so much.
We appreciate
for having
you
us.
very much.
We appreciate y'all having us here. Thank y'all.
And there will be an opportunity for everyone to take pictures. So we will be bringing the step and repeat up onto the stage, and please stick around afterwards. And
Laura's taking all
continue the
my lines. Keep
conversation.
going. Keep going, girl.
I don't know. I will not be here to take pictures. These guys will.
No, I'm here. Thank you. That was awesome. This was like the perfect way to end the conference, don't you think? I mean, we could listen to you all afternoon, but unfortunately, we got to wrap it up. I did appreciate the persistence. Like when you're watching on TV, it seems easy, doesn't it? Oh, they're so rich. Everybody's paying for all their stuff. I wish somebody would be paying me to do my housing rehab. But it's not the case.
Unfortunately,
And it's not the case with our work that we do either, right? It's really hard. It's hard to find financing to do the work we do, right? Just like they're talking about, and finding those people and convincing the investors to invest in housing into neighborhoods that have been left behind. It takes that persistence in figuring out how to get the approvals that we need to get done, to find the buyers, to get the buyers a mortgage, to get the appraisals to where we need it to be in order to get the mortgage. So like, while this was fun and entertaining, as is their show, it also is very comparable to what you all do every day to make a difference in the state of Michigan. So thank you. It was just so appropriate. And you're funny. So fun.
thank you.
So one more round of applause.
Thank you all very much.
And thank you to Laura and the Rocket Fund for sponsoring this. Without your sponsorship, we would not be able to do this session. So we really, really appreciate all you do, not just for sponsoring the conference, but for everything that you're doing, showing the leadership within the city of Detroit. We appreciate that.
Laura, thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
So hopefully you guys enjoyed the conference. I know I did. I know I am leaving feeling inspired. I hope you all are leaving feeling inspired. I cannot tell you how many people came up to me and said thank you for the conference, and really expressed like a different vibe they were feeling this year. And I think everyone is kind of feeling that momentum, that we have this opportunity, why housing is the topic, to fix our systems, our housing ecosystems, to invest in our neighborhoods, to stabilize the housing within the state of Michigan, and most importantly, making sure that every Michigander has a place to call home. So thank you. Thanks again to the MISHDA staff and organizers. I know it was stressful and you guys worked very hard. Thank you so much for that. As Laura said, there will be pictures. If you want to line up over on the ramp for pictures, if you would like a picture, thank you for being willing to stay. We appreciate that. I think it's time for us to get back to building. So let's go.
Let's go. Make no excuses now. I'm talking here and